Welcome to Darkverse, the place where the shadows of the past and present merge, and the eerie tales that lurk in the unknown are brought into the light. I'm Isaac Nightshade, your guide into the heart of terror, uncovering stories that will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Tonight, I'm diving into a series of disturbing, true horror stories, ones that explore the terrifying reality of the people we once trusted and loved. These aren't just your average breakups. These are the kind of relationships that go terribly wrong, where obsession turns into something far darker than anyone could ever imagine. From obsessive exes who can't seem to let go to relentless stalkers who refuse to stay out of your life. These stories will make you rethink what it means to truly escape someone from your past. So sit back, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the madness of toxic love. If these true stories of obsession and horror leave you captivated, be sure to subscribe and join me in the Darkverse. The darkness is waiting. So let's begin. Story 1. The Silent Stalker. When I moved to the small town of Westbrook, I never imagined that my life would be shaken by something so unsettling, something that would haunt me for years. Westbrook was a quiet town, a place where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. It was exactly the kind of place I needed after my parents had decided to relocate for work. I was the new kid at school, and I thought that my biggest problem would be making friends in a town where everyone seemed to know each other. The first few months felt lonely. Everything in Westbrook seemed quieter than usual, almost dull. The buildings had this worn-down look, as if time had passed them by, and the air always felt cold and distant. I spent most of my time keeping to myself, walking between school and home, trying to avoid interaction with others. My classmates didn't seem to be much better off. They were polite enough, but there was an invisible wall between us. No one really tried to get to know me, and I didn't mind. I thought if I just kept my head down, I'd get through it. It wasn't long before I met Vanessa. I first saw her in the school cafeteria. She was the kind of girl who walked into a room and instantly became the center of attention. She was loud, outgoing, and somehow always seemed to have a crowd of people orbiting her. I remember how she made eye contact with me and waved me over to her table. She smiled in that way that made you feel like you already knew her, like you'd been friends for years. "Hey, you're the new girl, right?" Vanessa said with a bright grin. "Come sit with us. We need more girls who can actually remember their lines for drama club auditions." It caught me off guard, and I felt the sudden desire to blend into the background, but I agreed to sit down. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I found myself walking with her after school. She would talk nonstop about everything from school gossip to her dreams of becoming an actress in LA. She kept me entertained with her sharp wit and impressions of teachers and classmates. I couldn't help but laugh, and for the first time since I moved, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Vanessa and I became inseparable. She started texting me every morning before school and again at night. She'd tell me about her rehearsals, about the plays the school was putting on, about her latest romantic disaster. Sometimes I'd share little things about my life, but mostly she did the talking, and I didn't mind. Her energy, her drive, made everything feel less dull. I started looking forward to our walks, our talks, and our hangouts after school. It all seemed perfect, until it wasn't. One evening as we walked home after a late rehearsal, Vanessa turned to me with a mischievous grin. "So we're dating now, right?" I froze, my mind racing. I hadn't even thought about it like that. We had never discussed it. But I couldn't help myself. I nodded, unsure of what I was agreeing to. She grabbed my hand and smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't let go. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were close. We had fun together. And maybe this was how things were supposed to be. But then, things started to change. Vanessa started getting more possessive. It was small at first, commenting on what I wore, saying I shouldn't talk to certain people because they were two-faced. She didn't like me texting other people during our time together. She made it clear that I should spend my time with her and her alone. I thought maybe it was just part of her personality. She was intense, always the center of attention. But as time went on, I started to feel the pressure. It wasn't long before she began to make more demands. She asked for my phone password, my social media accounts. She insisted that we should share everything. I didn't understand why, but I thought maybe it was just her way of showing how much she cared. She told me that if I didn't have anything to hide, I should have no problem sharing everything with her. But it wasn't just the demands that started to unsettle me. It was the way she started acting when I didn't reply to her messages fast enough. If I didn't pick up the phone right away, she'd send more texts, each one shorter, each one angrier. It was subtle at first, but soon it became clear. If I didn't answer her call, she would show up at my door, waiting for me. She would stand there, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd committed some unspeakable crime. "I don't like it when you ignore me," she said one evening, her voice sharp. "Don't you know how much I care about you?" I started to feel trapped. The final straw came one evening when I was 10 minutes late to one of her rehearsals. I had stopped by the library, and when I arrived at the school, she was waiting for me in the hallway. Without saying a word, she grabbed my wrist, her grip so tight that it left marks on my skin. Her eyes were cold, devoid of emotion. She whispered in my ear, "If you want to disappear, just say it." I was shaken. I had never seen that side of her before. It wasn't just a harsh comment, it was a threat. The fear that gripped me at that moment didn't let go. I didn't know what Vanessa was capable of anymore. From that moment on, I knew I had to end things. I didn't want to confront her face to face. I was terrified of what she might do. So I did. It over text. I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed space. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Her response was immediate. She sent me a flood of angry messages, accusing me of betraying her, of leaving her when she needed me the most. I didn't answer. I blocked her number, but she kept finding ways to contact me. New numbers, new accounts. It didn't stop. Eventually, I had enough. I told my parents everything, showed them the texts, the bruises, the fear that was slowly consuming me. They were supportive, but it wasn't enough. I filled out the paperwork for a restraining order. I changed my number, moved to a new town, a new school, anything to get away from her. But the past didn't let me go that easily. Years later, I thought I had moved on. I was in college now, studying in a big city, far away from Westbrook. I had new friends, a new life, and I thought I was free of Vanessa's hold. That was until one day when I was walking across campus, waiting for my next class. I felt it, the same cold, familiar sensation I'd felt in Westbrook. The feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, and there she was, Vanessa. She was standing a few feet away, just staring at me. Her expression was blank, but I could see it in her eyes. She hadn't changed. She was still obsessed. The sight of her made my stomach drop. I couldn't move. My legs froze. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but no, this was real. She didn't approach me. She didn't speak. She just watched, her eyes following my every move. Then someone in her group called her name, and she turned, walking away like nothing had happened. But that look, it stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, I saw her again, a few times, always in passing. Once in the library, once near the student center. She never spoke, never came near me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Every time she looked at me, I felt like I was being pulled back into the nightmare. The text messages came too. Blank. Text emojis. Once a picture of the coffee machine in the science building, the same one where we first met. I had no choice but to change my number, block everything, and notify campus security. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. The silence only lasted for so long. A few months later, I found out that she had left the area to go to another city to try her luck at some acting gig. I hoped that would be the last I'd ever hear of her. But deep down, I still feared that she hadn't truly left, that somehow she would find a way back into my life. I still look over my shoulder sometimes, checking faces in the crowd, wondering if Vanessa is out there, waiting for her next opportunity to make her presence known. Story 2. The phone calls that never stopped. It all began on a quiet Tuesday evening when I thought I was finally getting my life back together after a painful breakup. For years, I had been in a tumultuous relationship with Ethan, a guy who was charming but incredibly possessive. When we broke up, I was devastated at first, but over time, I managed to regain my independence. I moved into a new apartment, settled into my job, and started getting back to the things I loved. The silence was comforting, too comforting at times, but it was mine. I could finally breathe without feeling the constant tension hanging in the air. Everything seemed perfect, that is, until I started receiving the phone calls. It wasn't immediate. At first, it was just one random call late, at night, a number I didn't recognize. I assumed it was some kind of telemarketer, so I didn't answer. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time I answered, there was nothing, just heavy breathing on the other end of the line. I felt a chill run down my spine every time. It was too deliberate, too intentional. I hung up every time hoping it would stop, but the calls continued. After a week of this eerie silence, I finally decided to do some research. I found out that I could use a service to trace unknown numbers, but when I tried it, the results were always the same. No caller ID. That didn't sit well with me. The calls seemed to come at random hours, always after midnight, always when I was alone. My heart raced every time my phone vibrated in the dark, and I started sleeping with my phone on silent just to avoid the anxiety. One night, after another long day of working late, I got home around 10:30 p.m., tired but relieved to be in the comfort of my own space. I was just about to lock the door when I received a new call. Without thinking, I answered it, but I immediately regretted it. "You're still so beautiful." "I miss you," a voice whispered, sending a shiver down my spine. The voice sounded strangely familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. I froze, my blood running cold as I tried to process what was happening. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice shaky, heart pounding in my chest. There was a brief pause before the voice replied, "You know who this is." And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone in horror. My mind raced, but I could only think of one person who would say something like that. Ethan. But how was it possible? I had changed my number right after we broke up. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year, and now this? I immediately blocked the number and tried to calm myself down. I told myself it was probably just a sick prank, someone using a voice changer, or maybe someone who just knew too much about me. But as the days passed, the calls continued, and each one seemed more personal, more unsettling. One night, the caller asked about my new job. How they knew where I worked, I had no idea. The next call, they described the clothes I had been wearing that day in excruciating detail. Every call made me feel more and more trapped in my own apartment, like I was being watched. I started questioning every creak of the floorboards, every passing car outside, every noise in the building. Was someone waiting outside my door, hiding in the shadows? A few weeks into this nightmare, the phone calls became more frequent. At one point, I picked up the phone and just heard static for a long moment, then faint whispers of my name. They weren't threats. They weren't violent or aggressive, but they were so invasive. The caller seemed to know things about my day-to-day life, my routine, the places I went. They even asked me if I was dating anyone, and in the same breath, they asked if I missed Ethan. I couldn't take it anymore. I reached out to the police, explained what was happening, but they couldn't do much without evidence. They advised me to change my number again, to be more cautious, and to report anything new. I did everything they suggested, but it didn't stop. The calls kept coming. One night, as I sat on my couch, flipping through TV channels, I noticed the streetlights outside flicker through the blinds. A sense of dread crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The phone on the coffee table buzzed, and I picked it up without thinking. I immediately regretted it. "Why don't you come outside? I want to see you," the voice said, so calm, so smooth. My blood turned cold. "I know you're watching me," I whispered, voice trembling, barely able to keep it together. "I'll go to the police." The voice chuckled. "You think the police will stop me?" I slammed the phone down and bolted the door. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was losing control, losing grip on everything. My apartment, once a place of solace, felt like a prison. I couldn't even open the windows to get fresh air without the fear that someone might be watching from the street. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was outside. Every time I peeked out the blinds, I saw nothing, but I still couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. I felt like my every move was being followed. The breaking point came one night when I received a call right after I got home from work. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, dreading the sound of that haunting voice. "I'm outside your apartment, just waiting," the voice whispered. I didn't hesitate this time. I grabbed my phone, ran out of the building, and called a friend. My friend Sarah picked up immediately. "I'm scared," I said, voice cracking. "I need you here now." Sarah rushed over to my place. We waited in the parking lot together for what felt like hours, keeping an eye out for any sign of someone lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing. It was dead quiet, and I felt foolish for letting my anxiety get the best of me. But the calls kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. I didn't know what to do anymore. The feeling of being watched, the paranoia, it was all-consuming. One night I decided to confront the situation head-on. I waited in my apartment, prepared to face whoever it was. When the phone rang again, I picked it up, holding my breath. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady, demanding. The silence on the other end felt suffocating. Then finally the voice spoke again. "You haven't figured it out, have you? It's me, Ethan." The recognition hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt numb, like the world around me was spinning too fast. Ethan had somehow tracked me down, even after everything. After I changed my number, after everything that had happened. He had been watching me the entire time. I didn't know how to stop it. The police had already warned me about obsessive exes, but this was a different kind of obsession. A kind that felt too personal, too intense. And as the days passed, I realized that the fear of being watched would never go away until I found a way to truly escape. Story 3, the gift that wouldn't stop giving. I had always been the kind of person who stayed polite but kept my distance. I wasn't the one to start drama, but I certainly wasn't going to get too close either. After all, in high school, I had learned the hard way that people, especially the people who seemed friendly at first, could turn out to be people you didn't want to be around. It was just easier to keep people at arm's length. That was exactly how I treated Lisa. I met Lisa during my first week of university. We were both new to the campus, and naturally we were placed in some of the same orientation groups. She was the kind of person who immediately lit up a room with her energy. She was funny, outgoing, and to be honest, I felt like she was one of those people who could make friends with a brick wall. Everyone seemed to like her, and because of that, it wasn't hard for her to become a central figure in our group. I didn't mind hanging out with her, but I never let myself get too close. I could tell that she wanted more. More time with me, more conversations, more everything. She invited me to lunch, to parties, to hang out in the dorms, but I declined most of her invitations. I didn't want to get attached. I didn't want to be pulled into something I wasn't ready for. It wasn't long before she started to notice my distance. Lisa didn't take rejection well. At least that's what I thought at the time. Her messages, which had started as friendly and light, began to take on a more insistent tone. It started small, just a few, "Hey, I miss you, come hang out," followed by a few more texts asking why I hadn't responded. I thought it was harmless at first. She was just a little more enthusiastic than most people. But then things started to get strange. I was sitting in my dorm room one night, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a new notification from Lisa. It was a simple message that said, "I've left something for you outside your door. I hope you like it." I was taken aback. Lisa had never done anything like this before. I opened my door cautiously, unsure of what to expect. And there it was, a small box wrapped in pink paper, tied with a ribbon. I didn't even have to open it to know who it was from. I had no idea what it was, but something about it made me uneasy. I opened the box to find a framed picture of myself. It was a recent photo, one taken at a party I had gone to the previous weekend. Lisa must have snapped it when I wasn't paying attention. She had framed it in a delicate silver frame, but it wasn't just the picture that caught my attention. In the corner of the frame, there was a small note, handwritten in messy ink. "I'm glad you're finally starting to see how much we're meant to be." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what to think. It was sweet in a way, but also very unsettling. I immediately sent her a text, asking why she had given me this gift, but I received no response. The next day, she appeared at my dorm again. This time she brought a bouquet of flowers. "I know you've been busy," she said, smiling, "but I thought you might like a little reminder that I'm thinking of you." I forced a smile, trying to play it off. "Thanks, but I don't need anything. You don't have to keep doing this." Lisa laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Of course. I just wanted to brighten your day. You're always so serious." I was feeling more uncomfortable by the minute. The flowers felt like a guilt trip, and I could tell she was trying to make me feel bad for not responding. I thanked her again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The texts continued. They became more frequent, more intense. She started sending me messages at all hours of the night. "You're not alone, you know. I'm always here for you. And I was thinking about you today. I hope that's okay." It was the next text, however, that pushed me over the edge. It was a simple picture of a plain white card. On the card, written in black ink, were 3 words: "I love you." I stared at my phone, my stomach sinking. She had crossed a line. I confronted Lisa the next day, meeting her in the campus coffee shop. Her smile was the same as always, but I could tell she knew something was wrong. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what you're doing, but this has to stop. I'm not interested in this, whatever it is you're doing." She looked at me, her expression faltering for just a moment before she quickly recovered. "What do you mean? I'm just being your friend. You know I care about you." "You're suffocating me," I said, my voice rising. "This isn't normal. You keep texting me at all hours, leaving gifts, acting like we're more than friends." Her eyes widened slightly, but she still smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just trying to be there for you. I thought we were close. Don't you want to be close to me?" "I don't want to be close to you like that," I said firmly, standing up to leave. "I don't want this kind of attention. It's too much." She followed me, but I was determined to distance myself. As I walked back to my dorm, I could hear her footsteps behind me, quickening as I moved. Faster. She was saying something, but I didn't turn around to listen. That night I received more texts, dozens in fact. The messages had taken on a different tone. "You can't avoid me forever. I'm always going to be here. You don't have a choice. I'm not going anywhere." And it didn't stop there. The next day I returned to my dorm to find that my door had been locked from the outside. I was trapped in my room with no way to get out. I don't know how she did it, but somehow Lisa had found a way to get inside, lock the door, and leave me trapped. It didn't end there. The next few days were filled with a blur of missed calls, strange messages, and more gifts left at my door. She knew everything about me, my class schedule, my favorite foods, where I liked to study. She had become obsessed. In the end, I had to leave. I moved to another dorm, changed my phone number, and blocked Lisa on every social media platform. But the damage had been done. I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Every time I passed someone in the hall, every time I saw a shadow from the corner of my eye, I couldn't help but wonder, was she still there, lurking in the background? I don't know if Lisa was ever truly gone. All I know is that it took me years to feel safe again, to trust people the way I had before she entered my life. Sometimes I still get a random text, a message with no name, from an unknown number, and I wonder if it's her. I wonder if I'm ever truly going to be free of the gift that wouldn't stop giving. Story 4, the ex who wouldn't let go. It was the beginning of my sophomore year in college, and I was just starting to feel like I had my life together. I'd moved into a new apartment off campus, was making new friends, and finally found my rhythm after my first year. But there was one thing that I couldn't seem to shake: my ex, John. John and I had been in a relationship all through high school. He was my first love, the one I thought I would spend forever with. But as I grew older, I realized that we weren't right for each other. He was possessive, controlling, and in many ways, emotionally draining. After many failed attempts to break up with him, I finally ended things for good during the summer break after senior year. I expected the usual aftermath: hurt feelings, awkward conversations, and a few attempts at reconciliation. But what I didn't expect was for him to refuse to let me go. At first it was the texts. They were normal at first, just a few, asking how I was doing, apologizing for things he had said during our breakup, and expressing how much he missed me. I told myself it was just him processing the breakup, and I didn't want to be too harsh, so I responded with short, polite messages. I didn't want to be cruel, but then the tone started to shift. His messages began to grow more intense, more desperate. He started sending me long paragraphs, accusing me of forgetting about him, of betraying him, of moving on too easily. The messages became obsessive, spiraling into hurtful rants about how I was the only one who ever understood him, how I was the reason for his happiness, and how I had destroyed him. I tried to ignore them. I thought, he'll get over it. This is just a phase. But then he started showing up unannounced. At first, it was just him waiting outside my dorm or near the student union building, watching me from a distance. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just a coincidence. But as time went on, it became impossible to ignore. I would see his car parked near the entrance to my apartment complex. He would sometimes walk past my window, just lingering for a few minutes before walking away, only to return again later. It was like he was keeping watch on me, making sure I wasn't doing something he didn't approve of. One night I was studying at my kitchen table when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated. I went to the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. There he was, John, standing on the other side with his hands in his pockets. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't open the door. I texted him instead, asking why he was there. His response came immediately. I just wanted to talk. We need to figure this out, okay? You can't keep avoiding me. I told him I wasn't interested in talking, that our relationship was over, but his response was chilling. You can't just leave me like this. You think I'm going to just let you go? No, it doesn't work like that. I didn't reply. Instead, I called one of my roommates who came to the door to check if I was okay. By the time she arrived, John was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. The next few weeks were filled with more visits. He would show up at my apartment, my classes, and even at the gym. I would catch him standing in the distance, staring at me. One time I saw him sitting at a coffee shop across from campus, watching me through the window. I couldn't understand why. He wouldn't leave me alone. It got worse when he started to leave things for me. Notes, flowers, and even gifts. Every time I would return home, I would find something waiting for me outside my door or in my mailbox. The gifts were always things that reminded me of our past together. A stuffed bear we had shared when we were younger, a picture frame from a trip we had taken to the beach, and a necklace that I had given him years ago. It was like he wanted to recreate the good memories, to force me to remember the things I had already moved on from. The final straw came one evening when I came home late from work. I had just gotten off a long shift at the local coffee shop, and I was exhausted. When I entered my apartment, I noticed something odd, a small leather-bound journal sitting on my kitchen counter. I hadn't left it there, and I didn't recognize it. I opened it, and my heart sank. It was filled with pages of writing, John's writing. The entire journal was dedicated to me. He had written about our relationship, detailing every moment, every date, and every conversation we had ever had. But it didn't stop there. He also wrote about how I was the only one who truly understood him, how no one else could ever make him feel the way I did. Towards the end, the journal became darker. He wrote about how he couldn't live without me, how he had to make me see that we belonged together. That's when I realized this wasn't just some unrequited love. This was obsession. This was dangerous. I called the police. I showed them the journal, and they were quick to act. They issued a restraining order against John and advised me to take extra precautions, locking my doors, installing better security, and being aware of my surroundings. I had to change my phone number, my email, and my social media accounts. But the worst part was that the police couldn't do much beyond that unless he physically threatened me. For the next few weeks, I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, always worried that John would show up at my door. The worst part was that I didn't know how far he was willing to go. He was unpredictable, and every time I thought it was over, he would pop up again. I tried to move on with my life, but every time I thought I was free, something would happen to pull me back into his web of control. I was constantly on edge, never able to fully relax. The feeling of being watched lingered like a dark cloud over me, and it wasn't until months later when I finally moved to a new city that the nightmare seemed to stop. I haven't heard from John in years, and I try not to think about him too much. But sometimes when I pass by a street or see a car that looks like his, my stomach drops. And I wonder if he's still out there, lurking in the background, waiting for his chance to make me his again. Story 5. The ex who watched me sleep. When I was in my early 20s, I was dating a guy named Matt. He wasn't my first love, but he was the one I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. He was charming, funny, and he cared for me in a way that made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But as time went on, I started to realize that maybe his attention wasn't as healthy as I thought it was. Matt had a tendency to be clingy, something I initially brushed off as him just being in love. He always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, and when I'd be home. He would text me throughout the day, and if I didn't reply right away, he would send multiple messages asking if everything was okay. At first, I thought it was sweet, but as the months went by, it started to feel more like a burden than affection. I remember the day we broke up. I had finally had enough. I couldn't stand feeling trapped in a relationship where my every move was monitored. I had tried talking to him about it, telling him that I needed space and independence, but he never seemed to understand. The more I pulled away, the more he clung to me. It was like he couldn't let go of the idea of us, and no matter how many times I said it was over, he wouldn't accept it. The night we broke up, I packed my things and left his apartment. I moved in with a friend for a while, hoping the distance would help both of us heal, but that's when things started to get strange. At first, it was just the phone calls. Every few hours, my phone would ring, and every time I answered, there would be silence on the other end. I thought it was just him calling to see if I would pick up. But then the messages started. They weren't from an unknown number. They were from Matt, and they were just one word or sometimes a single sentence. "Where are you? I miss you. You shouldn't have left." It felt eerie, like he was trying to get inside my head, make me feel guilty for leaving him. I didn't want to engage, so I blocked his number. But blocking him didn't seem to stop him. The messages started coming from different numbers. Unknown, untraceable. He would send messages late at night, ones that made me feel uneasy. "I'm watching you," "I'm right outside," or "I can see you through your window." At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I was overreacting. But then one night, it happened. I had been home alone, lying in bed after a long day of work. I lived in a small apartment in a building that overlooked a parking lot. The lights from the street below filtered into my room, and I could hear the sounds of cars passing by. I was exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open, when I heard a faint tapping at my window. I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch brushing against the glass. But then it came again, faint but deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to think. I forced myself out of bed, my legs shaking as I walked toward the window. When I peered out, there was nothing, just the empty parking lot. I was about to turn away when I saw it, a shadow. It was hard to make out, but I could see someone standing there just outside my window, their face hidden by the darkness. I froze. I didn't know who it was. I didn't want to know, but I knew. Deep down, I knew it was Matt. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away from the window, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I ran to the door, locked it, and then checked the windows to make sure they were all secure. The tapping continued. It went on for what felt like hours. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed in the living room, moving from window to window, trying to see if I could catch a glimpse of whoever was out there. But no one ever showed their face again. The noise eventually stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next day, the messages returned. He was still texting me, telling me how much he missed me, how he couldn't live without me. But the messages grew darker. They weren't just sad anymore. They were threatening. "You can't leave me. I won't let you. You belong to me." I called my friend, and she immediately came over to stay with me for the night. I wasn't going to risk being alone with whatever this was. But Matt didn't stop. The next night, he showed up at my door. I was in the kitchen when I heard the knock, and I froze. My stomach twisted in knots. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to face him. But then I heard his voice. "Come on, I know you're there. Open the door. Let me in. We can fix this." His voice was calm, almost eerily calm, like he wasn't the man I had once loved. The man at the door wasn't Matt anymore. He was someone else, someone who was desperate and angry, someone who believed he could force me to love him again. I told him to go away, but he wouldn't listen. He kept knocking, then started pounding on the door, shouting my name. I called the police. When they arrived, Matt was gone. He had disappeared into the night, but the damage had already been done. I moved again. I packed my things and left that apartment for good. I moved to a new city, started a new job, and tried to put the past behind me. For months, I didn't hear from Matt. I thought maybe he had moved on. Maybe he was finally letting go. But then one day, I received a message from an unknown number. Do you remember the night we spent together? I do. I'm still watching. I blocked the number and tried to ignore it, but the messages didn't stop. They kept coming. At night, I could feel the weight of someone's eyes on me, even when I was alone in my new apartment. And every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was him. I don't know where Matt is now or if he's still watching me, but I can't shake the feeling that he's out there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to re-enter my life. Every knock at the door, every strange text message brings back that terrible feeling. The feeling of someone who can't let go. Someone who will do anything to get you back, even if it means breaking you in the process. Story 6. The ex who stalked me across state lines. I never thought something as simple as breaking up with someone could lead to the nightmare I ended up living through. My ex, Daniel, was a quiet guy, easy to talk to, and a little reserved. We met during my last year of college, and at first everything seemed perfect. He treated me well, was always there when I needed him, and never made me feel uncomfortable. But somewhere along the way, things started changing. It was subtle. At first, he began becoming more possessive, asking where I was going when I went out with friends or who I was hanging out with. At first, I thought it was sweet. He was just concerned. But soon it escalated. He would text me multiple times if I didn't respond right away, asking why I was being distant. If I didn't reply fast enough, he'd call, leaving voicemails that I didn't want to listen to, but felt obligated to. One evening, after yet another argument about how he felt ignored and unimportant, I broke up with him. I told him it wasn't working, that I needed space, and that I didn't feel like we had a future together. He didn't take it well. He begged me to reconsider, telling me how much he loved me and how he would change. But I knew it was over. For the first few weeks after the breakup, I had peace. I stayed at my apartment, went out with friends, and didn't hear from him much. He messaged me a few times to check in, but nothing that raised any alarms. I told myself it was just him being clingy and it would eventually die down. But then the messages started getting more frequent, more intense. I started getting strange messages in the middle of the night. At first, it was just random texts that made no sense. Then came the chilling ones. You'll regret this. I'm still watching you. And finally, the most unsettling. I know where you live. It didn't stop there. One evening, I came home to find a gift at my doorstep. It was wrapped in brown paper, with no note attached. When I opened it, my heart sank. It was a stuffed animal, one I used to have as a kid. I couldn't understand how he knew about it, but there was no mistaking the feeling that it was a warning, a sign that he was still watching me. I immediately changed my locks, set up security cameras, and started being more vigilant. But it didn't stop. One morning, I went outside to grab the mail and noticed something strange. Daniel's car was parked a few houses down the street. I thought I was imagining things, but I kept looking out the window, waiting for him to leave. He didn't. He stayed there for hours, just sitting in the car, staring at my building. I panicked. I blocked his number, but he started reaching out through other means. He created new email addresses, social media profiles, and began sending messages from random numbers. Each one of these felt like an attack, designed to make me feel trapped and helpless. The worst part was when I decided to take a trip to visit my family out of state. I thought I could get away, get some peace, and clear my head. But when I arrived at my parents' house, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia until I checked my phone. There in my inbox was a new email from Daniel. The subject line read, "I know you're not there. I'm waiting for you." I thought I was going crazy. How could he know I was out of state? I hadn't posted anything on social media, and I hadn't even mentioned my plans to anyone. I immediately called my parents and told them what had been going on. My dad, worried, called the local police to make sure there was a record of it, but they couldn't do much without any proof of an actual crime. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced that he was nearby, watching me. Sure enough, the next day I received another message. This time, it was a picture of me walking into my parents' house. A photo that had been taken when I was leaving the gas station down the road. He had followed me all the way from my city to theirs. The realization hit me hard. Daniel had been tracking me. He had somehow gotten my travel information and had followed me for miles across state lines. That was the moment I realized the danger I was truly in. I couldn't go anywhere without him knowing. I called the police again, and this time, they took the situation more seriously. They traced the emails and phone numbers to a burner phone he had purchased, but he had covered his tracks well. Still, with my parents' help, I filed a restraining order, and the police gave me advice on how to protect myself and stay safe. I left my parents' house as soon as I could and returned home, but the messages didn't stop. They grew even more personal. He would say things like, "I'm watching you sleep," or "I know what you did today." But the worst was yet to come. One day I came home from work to find a package on my doorstep. I knew right away it was from him. Inside there was a photo album filled with pictures of me. Some were taken when I was on my way to work, others when I was walking around town, or sitting at my favorite cafe. There was even a picture of me walking into my apartment building. On the inside cover he had written, "I know everything about you. You can't escape me." I couldn't take it anymore. I left my apartment for good and moved to a new city, changed my number, and started over. I reported everything to the authorities, but by then, it was too late to catch him. Daniel had vanished into the wind just as quietly as he had appeared. Months passed, and I thought I was finally free. But even now, I still get a shiver down my spine when I hear a knock at the door or when someone watches me from a distance. I sometimes wonder if he's still out there, stalking me in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reappear. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the past stays buried. Story 7, The Ex Who Moved Into My Building. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After 2 years of dating Sam, a man who was sweet at first but grew increasingly manipulative, I decided enough was enough. I packed up my things, found a new apartment in a quiet part of town, and swore that I would never look back. Sam and I had fought endlessly by the end of our relationship, arguing about everything from how I spent my time to the people I hung out with. But it was the final fight, when he got angry because I had a coffee date with a friend and accused me of moving on, that broke me. I ended it for good, and despite his pleas and emotional outbursts, I left. The first few months after the breakup were tough, but I was getting used to living alone. I found comfort in my new apartment, a small but cozy one-bedroom on the top floor of a secure building. The neighborhood was quiet, and I felt safe. There were moments, of course, when I would hear strange noises in the hall or feel an odd sense of being watched, but I convinced myself it was just the stress from the breakup getting to me. Everything seemed normal until one fateful Friday evening. I was coming home from work, just an average day. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and immediately noticed something strange. The air felt different, tinged with a kind of stillness that I couldn't shake. I dismissed it at first, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But when I walked into my living room, my blood ran cold. There, lying on the coffee table, was a photo. It was a picture of me from a couple of weeks ago, walking out of the grocery store. I could clearly see the familiar blue tote bag I always carried, my ponytail swishing behind me as I looked at my phone. The photo was taken from a distance, and I had no idea how Sam could have gotten it. I hadn't been posting on social media much, so how did he know where I was? My heart raced. I knew right away. This wasn't a coincidence. Sam had been watching me. I quickly checked my phone. Sure enough, there was a text from Sam. It was simple but terrifying. "I see you found the surprise I left." I froze. He was here, in the building. I bolted to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Still, I felt that eerie sensation, as if someone was right outside. It felt as if he was waiting just beyond the door, watching. I had to be sure. I called a friend, told her what had happened, and she urged me to call the police. But I couldn't. I knew Sam would find a way to talk his way out of it. It was always the same with him. Charming, convincing, and manipulative. Over the next few days, I noticed little things. My keys had been moved around on the kitchen counter, and my shoes, which I always kept neatly by the door, were scattered across the floor. I kept my blinds closed, but every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of a shadow moving outside. I knew I had to take action, but the thought of confronting him made my stomach turn. Then one night, while I was out for a late-night walk to clear my head, I saw him, standing across the street from my building, leaning against a street lamp. He wasn't looking at me directly, but I could feel his gaze on me. I ducked behind a nearby tree, hoping he hadn't seen me, but it was clear he was waiting. Watching. I couldn't believe it. How had he found me? Why was he doing this? I didn't understand. The next evening I was at home, sitting on the couch trying to distract myself with a book. I heard a soft knock at the door, just one, hesitant. I didn't get up right away, but the knock came again, louder this time. My heart was in my throat. I crept over to the peephole only to see a flash of a familiar face, a face I never wanted to see again. It was Sam. I stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. I couldn't let him in. I knew he would say whatever he needed to get inside and make me feel guilty for ending things. I had to keep the door shut. I waited for a few minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of his footsteps retreating down the hall. When I felt it was safe, I checked the hallway. Nothing, but the feeling of dread lingered. That night, I set up a small camera I had lying around, facing the door. I wasn't sure if it would do anything, but I had to try. I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the building felt like someone was sneaking around. In the morning, I checked the footage. It was more horrifying than I could have imagined. The camera had caught Sam. He had been standing right outside my door for nearly 2 hours, staring at it. I could see his figure through the lens, his hand resting against the doorframe, just waiting. I called my landlord the next morning and demanded that he take action. I also called the police, finally realizing that Sam wasn't just being annoying, he was stalking me. The police informed me that Sam had been in and out of trouble before, and his behavior was borderline criminal. They assured me they would do what they could, but they couldn't guarantee his immediate removal. But Sam didn't stop. If anything, he seemed to escalate. Every few days I would find new things, a note left under my door, a flower on my windowsill, more photos of me from different angles, taken on the street, in the grocery store, or even outside my apartment. It was clear he was everywhere. Finally, after what felt like months of fear and dread, I received a package. It was a small box, wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address. When I opened it, I found a small antique key attached to a note. It said, "You've locked me out, but I'll always have a way in." The sheer terror I felt in that moment was unbearable. It was a threat, pure and simple. A way for him to let me know that no matter what I did, he could get to me. That was the breaking point. I immediately packed up my things and left the apartment, moving in with my best friend. The landlord assured me that Sam would no longer be allowed on the property, and after a lengthy conversation with the police, a restraining order was put in place. Sam tried to contact me once more, but I blocked every number and email he could use. I've been in hiding for the better part of a year now, and while I've moved on with my life, I'm always cautious. Every time I check my phone or look out the window, I half expect to see his face. I've learned the hard way that you can never escape someone like that, no matter how far you run. Story 8, the ex who lived in my walls. I met Jake during my sophomore year of college. He was charming, charismatic, and seemed to be everything I had been looking for in a partner. We started dating quickly, and in the beginning, everything felt perfect. He would text me constantly, send flowers to my dorm, and take me out to the best restaurants. It felt like a fairy tale romance. But as time went on, things began to change. Jake's charming demeanor slowly morphed into something darker. At first it was subtle, small things like him becoming overly possessive or demanding to know where I was at all times. He would get jealous if I hung out with friends without him, and I found myself constantly reassuring him that he was the only one. It wasn't until after our first big fight that I realized just how controlling he was. We had an argument one night after I went out for drinks with my friends. When I came home, Jake was waiting for me, and the way he looked at me made my stomach churn. He demanded to know why I hadn't texted him during the night, why I hadn't called, and why I had been out without him. It was the first time he had raised his voice at me, and I was shaken. But I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a one-time thing and that he would get over it. Things only got worse from there. Jake started isolating me from my friends. He would tell me not to hang out with certain people, and I found myself choosing him over everyone else. I stopped making plans with my friends because I didn't want to deal with his mood swings. The once confident, independent woman I had been was slowly fading away, replaced by someone who lived in constant fear of upsetting Jake. But the real horror began when I moved into a new apartment. I thought it would be the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. New place, new environment. But Jake didn't let me go so easily. I had been living in my new apartment for about a month when I started noticing strange things. It started with the little things. My keys would be moved around. The bathroom light would be left on when I was sure I had turned it off. And occasionally I would hear faint footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment late at night. But I told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, living alone in a new place could be unsettling, right? Then one night, while I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find no one there, but something was off. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I closed the door and checked the peephole. Still nothing. I shrugged it off as a random occurrence. But the next night, the knocking returned. It was persistent this time. One knock, followed by another, and then another. I opened the door cautiously, but once again, there was no one there. I checked the hallway, but it was completely empty. It was at that moment that a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I decided to call Jake, hoping it was him and that he was just being overly concerned. When I picked up the phone, I heard a heavy breath on the other end. "What's wrong with you? You didn't answer me. Why aren't you picking up?" he demanded, his voice strained with frustration. I told him I hadn't been home and that I didn't want to argue, but his response was chilling. "I'm just making sure you're okay," he said almost too calmly. "I don't want to lose you." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I checked all the locks on the windows and doors before I went to bed, and I even put a chair in front of the front door for added security. But sleep didn't come easy. I lay awake for hours, listening to every creak and groan of the building, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid. The next morning when I left for work, I noticed something strange. There on the window ledge was a small piece of paper, folded neatly in half. My heart raced as I opened it. Written in Jake's handwriting was the simple message, "I'm always watching." I dropped the note and backed away from the window, panic rising in my chest. He was watching me, but how? I had been careful. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. How could he know? My hands trembled as I dialed the number of my best friend, telling her everything. She suggested I get a security camera, and so I did, installing one in the hallway facing the door. I hoped it would ease my mind, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't. That night, I went to bed exhausted but determined to get some rest. I fell asleep quickly, but I woke to the sound of something scraping against my window. My heart skipped a beat as I shot up in bed. I checked the camera feed on my phone. The screen was still, and there was nothing outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the building. I pulled the blanket tight around me and stared at the door, willing it to stay closed. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of breathing. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, as if someone was standing just outside my door, waiting. I called the police. When they arrived, I opened the door to find two officers standing in the hallway. "Ma'am, we need to check your apartment," one of them said. I stepped aside, my heart pounding in my chest as they went inside and started searching. When they reached the utility closet in the hallway, they found something that made my blood run cold. Jake had been living in the walls. Not in the sense of living there, full time, but he had been sneaking in through the maintenance hatch in the ceiling. They found a small makeshift bed in a pile of empty takeout containers hidden behind the drywall. There was evidence that he had been in and out of my apartment for weeks, watching me, waiting for the right moment to make himself known. I couldn't believe it. I had been living in the same space as him without even knowing it. The police found surveillance equipment and a few disturbing notes he had written, all signed with my name. Jake was arrested that night. He had been hiding in the walls of the building, and no one had known. It wasn't until they investigated the maintenance tunnels and ducts that they discovered the horrifying truth. It took me months to feel safe again. I moved out of that apartment, and the building's management promised to make repairs to prevent anyone from ever doing that again. But the experience left me scarred. Now every time I hear a creak in my own home, I wonder if someone is still watching me from the walls, waiting for the perfect moment to make his return. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed late at night, I swear I can hear faint breathing just beyond the door. But I never let myself believe it was real, because I know the horror I went through, and I hope that I never have to live through it again. Story 9, the ex who stalked me online. We were perfect at first. I met Chris during my second year of college, and right from the start, I was drawn to him. He was charming, funny, and always knew how to make me feel special. We spent weekends together, going on spontaneous road trips and cooking dinners in his apartment. Everything about our relationship felt natural, effortless even. At first we were just casually dating, but soon enough it was clear that things were moving fast. I wasn't sure if I was ready for something serious, but I liked him too much to say no. Slowly the pace of the relationship increased, and I started spending more time at his place. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our futures. It felt right, and for the first time, I was happy in a relationship. But as time passed, something started to feel off. Little things at first that I brushed off. He would text me constantly, checking in on me even when I was at class. He'd ask questions that seemed normal, like, "Who did you sit with in class?" Or, "What did you do for lunch?" But then it started to get more intrusive. He began asking about my friends, the people I was hanging out with, where I was going, and who I was talking to. At first I thought it was just his way of caring, maybe even insecurity. But as time went on, it felt more like control. He started accusing me of being distant whenever I didn't respond to his texts right away. He'd get upset if I spent too much time with my friends, especially guys. I couldn't even talk to my own male classmates without him acting possessive. It was when he started to monitor my social media that I started getting uneasy. I noticed he liked every single photo I posted within seconds of it going up. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was just supportive, right? But when I started posting about my friends or random events, I'd see that he had already commented, sometimes with overly possessive or overly familiar remarks like, "I wish I was there with you," or, "You're so much better with me." At first, it made me feel warm. He wanted to be involved in my life. But then, Arsonani began to realize how unhealthy it all was. One night after I posted a picture of my new outfit, Chris texted me, "You look beautiful. I love that you're showing off for me." I was taken aback. It wasn't the compliment that bothered me. It was how he phrased it. It felt like he owned me. He started asking to see photos of everything I wore before I went out, claiming it was because he wanted to make sure I was dressing appropriately. The final straw came after I tried to break things off. I'd been feeling increasingly trapped, suffocated by his constant attention and jealousy. I knew I needed space, so I sat him down and told him we should take a break. He didn't take it well. At first, he begged me to reconsider. When that didn't work, he started to show his darker side. He wouldn't let me leave his apartment, getting angry and upset when I tried to walk out the door. It was clear that something had changed in him. He was no longer the sweet, caring guy I had met. Over the next few days, Chris started stalking me online. He'd comment on every post I made, sending messages like, "I know you're still thinking about me," or "I saw your post, you looked amazing." But it wasn't just that. He started sending messages to my friends, asking them questions about where I was or what I was doing. He even tried to reach out to people I hadn't spoken to in months, all in an attempt to get information about me. The next level of his obsession came when he hacked into my social media. accounts. He changed my passwords and began controlling who could see my posts. I'd wake up to find that he had deleted certain posts or made changes to my profile. I couldn't change my password quickly enough before he was one step ahead. I remember one night when I got home after a long day at work, and my phone started buzzing. I had multiple notifications from Facebook, Instagram, and even my email. I checked them only to find that Chris had sent dozens of messages on every platform, messages saying things like, "We're meant to be together, and you can't leave me, you're mine." I was terrified. My own phone felt like a ticking time bomb, each message a reminder of how much control he was trying to exert over me. When I called my best friend, she told me that Chris had been showing up at my work, waiting outside the building, looking for me. That was when I realized how serious the situation was. He was willing to do anything to track me down. I knew I had to take action. I contacted the police and they were able to track the IP addresses used to access my accounts. They discovered that Chris had been following me online for weeks, even before the breakup. They issued him a warning, but it didn't stop. It only got worse. Chris would send harassing emails, text messages, and DMs. He would post passive-aggressive things on social media, trying to make me feel guilty for leaving him. It wasn't until I got a new phone number, changed all my passwords, and blocked every account he could possibly contact me through that things started to calm down. But even then, I wasn't safe. There were still nights when I'd be walking home from work, and I'd feel the familiar prickle of being watched. I'd turn around only to find no one behind me. I even thought I spotted his car a few times driving by my apartment building. My heart would race, and I would duck inside, never looking back. To this day, I haven't spoken to Chris. I don't know where he is or what he's doing now. I only hope that he's moved on and that I'm no longer a part of his obsession. It's been years, but I still double-check the locks at night and feel a shiver when I get an unexpected message from someone I haven't talked to in a while. I know now that the scars left by a controlling ex aren't always physical. They stay with you in ways you can't see, lingering just beneath the surface. Story 10, The Haunted Drive. I had been dating Lauren for almost a year when we decided to take a weekend trip up north. We were both living in a small town in the Midwest, and the idea of getting away from the hustle of life for a couple of days seemed like the perfect plan. We rented a small cabin near the woods, a place that promised peace and quiet, with nothing around but trees, fresh air, and the occasional bird flying by. It was around dusk when we left, the sun beginning to set as we drove along the long, winding highway leading to our cabin. The road was secluded, and as the daylight faded, so did the light from the street lamps. All I could see ahead of us was the yellow glow of the headlights cutting through the thick darkness. As we drove, Lauren was flipping through the playlist, humming to some song in the background. The occasional gust of wind swept across the road, the sound of the trees rustling in the distance breaking the silence. Everything felt peaceful until Lauren pointed out a strange figure standing at the side of the road, a man who looked to be in his mid-40s. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were far out in the country, so seeing someone on the side of the road was not exactly unusual. But Lauren had this look in her eyes. "Should we stop?" she asked, concern in her voice. "No," I replied firmly. I wasn't comfortable stopping. It didn't feel right. I continued driving past him, glancing in the rearview mirror for a moment. To my surprise, the man was now standing in the middle of the road, watching us as we drove away. My heart began to race. "Don't look back," I said to Lauren, my voice suddenly tense. Something about the way the man had been standing there, it unsettled me. It wasn't normal. It wasn't right. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, trying to shake off the eerie feeling creeping down my spine. But before I could, I noticed something in the distance, a set of headlights. At first, I thought it was a car coming toward us. But as I looked again, I realized the car was much too close for comfort, seemingly trailing us. "Do you see that?" Lauren asked, her voice shaking a little. "Yes," I replied, gripping the wheel tighter. The car behind us was gaining speed, closing in on us fast. The headlights were blinding now, and I could barely see the road in front of me. I stepped on the gas, trying to outrun it, but the car kept getting closer, as if it was somehow keeping pace with us. The feeling of dread settled over me like a thick fog. I glanced in the side mirror, and for a split second, I saw the figure again, standing at the side of the road. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was another man with him. The two of them just stood there watching us. "What is happening?" Lauren whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice tight. "We need to get to the cabin now." I pushed the pedal to the floor, the tires screeching as I turned off the main highway and onto a smaller dirt path that led to the cabin. For a moment, the car behind us slowed down, and I thought we might have lost it. But then just as I took a sharp turn into the woods, I saw the headlights again. Much too close. The car was right behind us now, right on our tail. It wasn't until we reached the cabin that the car finally disappeared, vanishing into the night. I pulled into the driveway, my heart racing, and quickly turned off the engine. Lauren and I sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the wind rustling through the trees. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. "I think we should call the police," Lauren said quietly, her eyes wide with fear. I agreed, but when I reached for my phone, I found there was no signal, nothing but a blank screen. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere. No service, no way to contact anyone. We locked the door and sat by the window watching the road, but nothing happened. No cars, no more headlights, no figures lurking in the distance. The world outside seemed as quiet as it had been when we first arrived. That night we tried to sleep, but neither of us could. Every noise, every creak of the house made us jump. The faintest sound of wind blowing through the trees outside sent chills up our spines. Eventually we must have fallen asleep, but I woke up hours later to the sound of tapping on the window. At first I thought it was just the wind, but as I listened more closely, I realized that two people, were tapping on the window. My stomach dropped. Slowly I turned to Lauren, who was still asleep beside me. I shook her, gently, and when her eyes opened, I whispered, "We need to leave." The tapping continued, steady and rhythmic. We grabbed what little we had with us and made our way to the car, trying not to make a sound. As we stepped outside, I noticed something in the distance. There, standing at the edge of the trees, were the two men from earlier. The same figures watching us silently. They didn't move. They just stood there. I wasted no time. We jumped into the car, started it, and without looking back, I floored the gas pedal. I didn't care that the cabin was expensive or that we had planned to stay the weekend. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what it was. The entire drive back felt like a blur. The headlights behind us never reappeared, and we didn't stop until we were safely back in town. We never spoke about that night again. But to this day, I still have that unsettling feeling whenever I drive down that road. I can't shake the image of those men, standing in the darkness, watching us, waiting. It was as if they had been expecting us, as if we had driven straight into a trap. Some part of me wonders if we'll ever really be free of that encounter. Story 11. The Unexpected Return. I never thought much about my ex, Connor, after we broke up. It had been a long time, 5 years in fact. Our relationship had ended badly with no real closure, but we'd both moved on. I found a new job, moved to a new city, and began dating someone else. Life, as they say, goes on, or at least that's what I believed. It all started on a Saturday afternoon. I was at the local grocery store, picking up some fresh vegetables for dinner, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The message simply read, "I miss you, you know." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My first thought was that it had to be some sort of prank or perhaps even spam. But something about it felt unsettling, especially since it was so direct. The way the message was written was too familiar, too specific. I didn't reply. I thought maybe it was just some kind of mistake, or maybe a wrong number, even though the message was clearly personal. But then the messages kept coming. At first it was just one or two random comments like, "Remember our summer vacations?" Or, "I see you're doing well, but are you really happy?" Each message grew increasingly more personal, as if someone had been watching me from afar, knowing exactly what I was doing when I was doing it. The final straw came when I received a picture of my apartment building, taken from across the street. A message accompanied it. "I'm closer than you think." That was it. My heart began to race. I had to know who this was. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message. "Who is this? Stop texting me." I was hoping it was just a mistake, but deep down I knew that wasn't the case. Over the next few days, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, checking my phone. Who would want to torment me like this? As the week went on, the messages stopped coming, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. And then, on a Tuesday night, it happened. I was home alone watching TV when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze. I walked slowly toward the door, peering through the peephole. Standing on the other side was someone I hadn't seen in years. Connor. My heart skipped a beat, and I almost couldn't breathe. His eyes were cold, emotionless, but his lips curled into a sinister smile as he waited for me to open the door. I didn't. I backed away from the door, feeling the walls closing in around me. What was he doing here? Why had he shown up unannounced after all these years? I tried to think of something to say, but nothing came to mind. The last time I'd seen him was the day we broke up. He'd left in a fit of rage and we never spoke again. He knocked again, harder this time. "Let me in. We need to talk." His voice came through the door, low and commanding. His words sounded more like an order than a request. My pulse quickened. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to hear what he had to say, but I couldn't just leave him there, could I? He could be dangerous, and I wasn't sure if I should call the police or try to confront him. He had always been unpredictable, especially when things didn't go his way. I called my roommate, but she didn't answer. I tried again, and this time she picked up. "I think Connor is outside my door," I whispered into the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do I do?" She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "You need to call the cops." "I don't care what he says. Get him to leave and call the cops." I ended the call, but Connor wasn't giving up. I heard him moving around outside the door, pacing back and forth. His footsteps seemed to echo in the hallway. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the fear gnawing at me. What did he want? What had changed in him to make him come here now? Suddenly, the door handle turned. I jumped back, heart pounding, but the lock held. For a brief moment, I thought about opening it, confronting him, but then I heard something that made my blood run cold. His voice, calm and almost playful, came through the door. "Don't be scared. I just want to talk. I've missed you. I've been waiting for you to come back to me." I backed away from the door, shaking, and my mind raced. This wasn't normal. Connor wasn't a person who just missed people. When we broke up, it was final. He had ghosted me for years. No texts, no calls, no attempts at contact. What had changed? Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone trying to break in. The lock clicked, and I realized he had somehow managed to force it open. Panicked, I grabbed my phone and hit 911. "Please," I whispered into the phone. "Someone's trying to break into my apartment." The operator asked for my address and assured me that help was on the way. But it didn't feel like enough. I wasn't sure how long I had until he was in. Before I could move, the door burst open. I screamed, but no sound came out as I saw him standing in the doorway, grinning widely. Connor had changed. His hair was longer and he had a roughness about him, like he hadn't cared for himself in a while. "I told you," he said, his voice soft and mocking. "I've been waiting for this moment. I'll never let you go." The door slammed, shut behind him as he advanced. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to run. But where could I go? There was nowhere to hide. I made it to the kitchen and grabbed the closest object, one of the kitchen knives, and held it in front of me, my hands shaking. Connor laughed, the sound sickening and familiar. "You think that will stop me? It won't, darling. I've already made up my mind." Before he could reach me, a loud crash echoed in the hallway, followed by the sound of footsteps pounding down the stairs. The police had arrived. Connor freezes, his eyes darting to the door. He looked at me one last time, his expression full of rage before he bolted for the window. Without a second thought, he jumped out and disappeared into the night. The officers were quick to enter the apartment, and I was escorted out for my safety. They found that Connor had broken in using a spare key he still had from when we lived together. It was terrifying to think how much he had planned this. The aftermath wasn't easy. Connor was arrested and charged with attempted breaking and entering, as well as harassment. I moved out of the apartment and changed my number, but I couldn't forget his last words to me. "I'll be back. We'll be together again." And I still wonder if he truly meant it, or if it was just another one of his twisted games. Either way, I'm never going to let him back into my life again. Not now, not ever. Story 12. The Unwelcome Reunion. It was a hot summer night when I got the message. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, breaking the silence of my small apartment. I didn't recognize the number. At first, I thought it was one of those spam messages that have become so common in the age of smartphones. But then the message popped up on my screen, and I couldn't look away. "Remember me?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The sender had used my full name. It wasn't the first time my ex, Peter, had tried to contact me. After the breakup, things had gotten messy. He couldn't accept the end of our relationship, and his obsessive behavior was one of the main reasons I ended things in the first place. But the past year had been peaceful. No phone calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I had thought he was finally letting go. I stared at the message for a moment before typing back a simple, "Who is this?" The reply was swift, as if he had been waiting for me to respond. "Don't play dumb. It's Peter. We have unfinished business." I felt the chill run down my spine. This was not the tone I remembered. Peter wasn't the type to be direct, to say things like that. I had been used to his sweet promises and pleading. This was different. This was menacing. Trying to stay calm, I turned off my phone and shoved it into my purse, hoping it was just a sick joke. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Peter had always been unpredictable when it came to emotions, and that was one of the reasons we fought so much. It wasn't unusual for him to try and manipulate me, but this felt like something else, something darker. The next day, I found a note on my front doorstep. "Let's talk. I'm waiting." My stomach twisted. My heart began to race. I never wanted to see Peter again. The memories of our relationship were tainted, filled with control and jealousy, and the final straw came when I had caught him spying on me at a coffee shop. Just one of the many times he had crossed boundaries. I had gone to the police once, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. I had moved to a new town, hoping for a fresh start. I never thought I would have to deal with him again. But now it seemed like I had no choice. He had tracked me down. He knew where I lived. That night after work, I stayed at home, keeping all the lights on, checking the locks on the doors repeatedly. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Was it him? Was he standing outside my door right now? My mind raced, wondering where he could be. I made the mistake of glancing out the window, hoping to spot anything suspicious. To my horror, I saw Peter's figure standing across the street, staring up at my apartment. His face was hidden in the shadows, but I could tell he was watching me. I backed away from the window, heart pounding in my chest. Was this it? Was he really back? And was he going to make me feel trapped again? I knew I couldn't call the police just yet. There was no crime to report, just a man staring across the street. But I was terrified. For the next few days, I didn't leave my apartment. I started obsessively checking the locks, the windows, my phone. I couldn't help myself. The stress was eating away at me. The feeling of being watched, of knowing that someone was out there waiting for me to slip up, was unbearable. Then one afternoon, I found something that made my blood run cold. I had been cleaning the counter when I found a note stuck to the back of the fridge. The same kind of note he had left on my doorstep before. This time, the message was different. "You think I'm just going to leave you alone? You belong to me." I nearly screamed. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again, trying to make sense of them. The Peter I had known, the Peter I had loved, was gone. In his place was something darker, something twisted. I had never been afraid of him before, not like this. That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag, grabbed my phone, and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Couldn't live like this. Looking over my shoulder every second of every day, waiting for the next message, the next note. I found a place to stay for a few days, a friend's apartment in a neighborhood far away from mine. I was terrified to go home, but the next day I called the police. I didn't know if they would be able to help, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't let him keep controlling my life from a distance. The police promised to look into it, but there was little they could do, without direct evidence. They said they would patrol the area, but I didn't feel reassured. I felt helpless. The days turned into weeks, and Peter's behavior escalated. He started showing up at my work. I would see him standing in the parking lot, leaning against his car, waiting for me to walk by. He never spoke, just watched. It was like he was daring me to make the first move. I eventually got a restraining order against him. The police managed to find his address and deliver the paperwork, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he would find a way to break it. Then one night it happened. I was coming home late after a meeting, walking through the parking lot, when I noticed the familiar white van parked near my building. My blood ran cold. The headlights were off, but I knew it was him. He had parked right outside as if waiting for me to return. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door, desperately trying to keep my hand from shaking as I fumbled for the keys. I turned the lock as quickly as I could and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. It was then that I saw something I hadn't noticed before, something that sent a chill down my spine. On the inside of the door, in the corner, was a small piece of paper, folded neatly with just one word written on it. Soon. I didn't stay another minute. I grabbed what I could and left, telling a friend to meet me at a coffee shop. I couldn't be there anymore. My life had turned into a nightmare, and I didn't know how to stop it. Weeks passed, and I eventually moved again to another city far away from him. I got a new phone, a new job, and even tried to start over. I thought the nightmare was over, but every time I see a white van on the road, my heart races. Every time I hear someone calling my name from a distance, I freeze, because I know that Peter is still out there, waiting, watching, and I don't think I'll ever be free. Story 13, the apartment doorbell that never stopped ringing. I never expected to find myself living in a place that would make me question everything about my past relationship. When I first moved into the apartment, it seemed perfect. A quiet corner of the city with friendly neighbors and a peaceful atmosphere. I had recently gone through a tough breakup, and I thought a change of scenery might help me find peace and start over. The apartment was on the third floor of a quaint, slightly outdated building. I didn't mind the peeling paint on the stairwells or the faint smell of mothballs lingering in the halls. It was cozy and affordable, a temporary refuge from the chaos of my life. It wasn't long before I started settling into a routine. I'd work from home during the day, take walks around the neighborhood in the evening, and spend my nights binge-watching shows and sipping wine. Everything seemed calm, too calm in fact, but there was one thing about this apartment that I couldn't shake, a strange lingering sensation that I was being watched. First I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, I had just gotten out of a relationship that had taken up so much of my energy, both emotionally and physically. My ex, Derek, had been controlling in subtle ways, checking my phone when I wasn't looking, keeping track of my whereabouts, showing up uninvited at places I visited. It took me months to gather the strength to end things, but I had finally done it. I had chosen freedom, and this apartment was supposed to be my sanctuary from everything. That had happened. One evening, about 3 weeks after I moved in, it all started. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard it, the sound of a doorbell ringing. It was faint at first, but then it rang again. I froze, knife still in hand, the sound echoing in my ears. I wasn't expecting anyone. The bell rang a third time, more insistent than the first two. A chill ran down my spine. I walked over to the front door and peered through the peephole. There was no one there. I stared at the empty hallway, feeling a growing sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. The silence was suffocating. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and for a moment I considered going back inside, pretending I hadn't heard anything. But then I heard it again, the doorbell, this time louder. I opened the door quickly, stepping into the hallway. No one. The corridor was empty, dimly lit by the flickering light above. My heart raced. I stepped out further, glancing left and right, but there was no sign of anyone. The hallway seemed ordinary, silent like it always had, yet something about it felt off. I had the distinct impression that I wasn't alone. I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. But the moment I returned to the couch, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was as if the sound reverberated through the walls. I stood there stunned. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, asking if they could come over for a bit. I needed to feel safe, and no one would come without a reason, so I just waited. The minutes felt like hours. After what seemed like an eternity, my friend finally arrived. I could see the light from their car pulling up in the parking lot outside. I opened the door and rushed to greet them, but as soon as I opened the door, my stomach sank again. The doorbell rang once more, followed by a series of knocks. Louder this time, as if someone was trying to break the door down. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. "What's going on? Who's knocking?" my friend asked, clearly disturbed. I shook my head. "I don't know. No one's here. But the bell, it keeps ringing." We stood there for a while, the tension thick between us, before I decided to call the building manager. He assured me that nothing strange had happened before, and that I was probably just overreacting. But that didn't comfort me. I asked if there was anyone else on my floor, anyone who might have access to my doorbell, but the manager insisted there were no issues. It was just me overthinking things. The doorbell stopped ringing for the rest of the night, and I managed to calm myself down. My friends stayed for a while, but eventually they left, leaving me alone once again in the silence of my apartment. I locked all the windows and checked the locks on the doors, though I knew deep down it wouldn't make a difference. The fear that gripped me was something I couldn't escape. That night I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure of someone standing outside my door. It was ridiculous, of course. No one was there, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't stop thinking about how real the doorbell sounded, how someone had to be there, trying to get my attention. Then as the night wore on, the doorbell rang again. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. But this time I didn't go to the door. Instead, I lay there staring at the dark shadows of the room, my body frozen. With fear, the bell rang again, and again, and again, as if it were mocking me. By the time the sun finally began to rise, I was a mess, my nerves shot. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me all night. The next morning, I went to the manager's office again. I was desperate for answers, even though I knew they wouldn't be easy to find. He walked me down to the security room and showed me the footage from the hallway camera. The timestamp showed a gap in the footage, almost 2 hours where nothing had been recorded, but there was no sign of anyone near my apartment. No one had been in the building, at least according to the cameras. The footage was completely blank. I didn't know what to think. How could that be? I had heard the doorbell. I had felt the presence of someone on the other side of the door. But according to the footage, there was nothing. It made no sense. The manager suggested that maybe I had heard things in my mind, that I was adjusting to a new place and dealing with the breakup in my own way. But I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had felt. I kept waiting for the next time the bell would ring. I didn't know when it would happen, but I was sure it would. And when it did, I was ready. I would record it, I would call the police, and I would figure out what was really going on. But that day never came. The doorbell never rang again. The silence settled in, and I started to believe that maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe the apartment was affecting me in ways I hadn't realized. Maybe the breakup had left me feeling more vulnerable than I thought. Months passed, and everything seemed normal. But every time I would walk through that hallway, I couldn't help but feel the lingering presence of something or someone watching me. And every time I went to bed, I'd lie awake, listening for the sound of the bell that might never come. But deep down, I knew the truth. Nothing about that place had ever been normal. One night, when I was lying in bed, I heard it again. The doorbell. This time I was ready. Story 14. The Unwanted Guest. My ex's return. It had been 2 years since I had gotten away from David. The toxic relationship that I had spent so long trying to ignore. The manipulation, the control, the lies. Everything felt like it had been a bad dream. After the breakup, I moved to a new city, a small town far enough to keep distance from the memories of him. But you can't outrun your past forever. The first few weeks in the new town were peaceful. I rented a small apartment near a park and settled into my new job. I didn't talk much about my old life with new people, and I didn't want to. I had learned that sometimes it's better to leave certain things buried. But one fateful Saturday evening, when I was returning from a grocery run, I saw something that made my heart stop dead in my chest. There, across the street from my apartment, parked in front of the corner store, was a car. It was David's car, the same silver sedan that had been his pride and joy. The car I had seen him drive for years. My stomach churned, and I immediately looked away, trying to ignore it. I convinced myself it was just another silver car. It was nothing, but deep down I knew I couldn't escape him. The next day, the same car was there. This time it was parked outside my apartment building. I stayed inside, nervous and confused. Had he found me? Was he following me? I tried to tell myself I was just overreacting, but the feeling of dread that washed over me wouldn't leave. The following days were filled with strange occurrences. I would come home from work to find the car parked just outside, sometimes for hours at a time. Other times, I would find strange, anonymous text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The messages were cryptic, one even saying, "You left me, but I'll always find you." I tried blocking the numbers, but the messages kept coming from different ones. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't have enough evidence. Was it really David? Could I be wrong? But every time I heard the engine of a car start outside, my heart would race. The fear started to affect my work and social life. I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't even sleep properly. I always kept the blinds drawn, the doors locked, and my phone close by. I told my friends and coworkers that I wasn't feeling well, but the truth was far worse. One evening, when I had just finished dinner, I received a text that sent a chill down my spine. It was a picture of me taken through the window of my apartment while I was sitting on my couch reading. The message simply said, "I'm closer than you think." That was it. That was when I knew. David was back. In a panic, I called a friend and asked for help. I told her everything. She was shocked, but promised she would help me figure out what was going on. She insisted I leave the apartment and stay at her house for the time being, just to be safe. But as I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, something stopped me in my tracks. The silver sedan was parked right outside my building again. This time I saw someone sitting inside, their face barely visible through the darkened windows. I froze in place, my blood running cold. I was sure it was David. Without thinking, I rushed to my car, heart pounding in my chest. But just as I was about to get in, I heard a voice behind me, a familiar voice. "I knew you wouldn't make it easy, but you can't run from me forever." I turned around in shock, and there he was, David. He was standing in front of me, that same cold smirk on his face, but his eyes were filled with something much darker. He had been watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. My heart raced as I realized just how close he had gotten to me again. How had he found me? I thought I had gotten away, but in the back of my mind, I knew he never really left. He had always been there, lurking, watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. David stepped closer, his voice quiet but filled with menace. "You thought you could leave me behind, but I never let go. I never will." In a desperate attempt to escape, I shoved past him and ran toward my car, not caring about anything else but getting away from him. I locked myself in, hands shaking as I started the engine. I sped away, barely able to breathe, feeling his eyes on me the entire time. I glanced in the rear view mirror and saw his silver car following me, just a few yards behind. I drove in circles, hoping to lose him, but no matter which direction I took, he was always there. I drove for hours until the streets were empty, the city quiet. Only then did I feel safe enough to pull over. I stopped in a secluded parking lot, my heart racing, and I called the police. When the officers arrived, I explained everything. They took my statement, but they couldn't act without more evidence. They suggested that I consider moving and getting a restraining order, But I knew deep down that no matter where I went, he would find me again. That night, I packed my bags and left my apartment behind. I went to a new place in another town, changed my number, and tried to rebuild my life. I've been living in fear for months, constantly checking my surroundings, unable to feel truly safe. David never stopped contacting me, even after I moved. Every time I think I've gotten away, something reminds me of him. I have changed my routine, changed my habits, but the fear never fully leaves. The calls, the messages, the feeling that I'm being watched, it's always there, like a dark shadow hanging over me. I don't know if he will ever truly stop, and part of me fears that the worst is yet to come. Story 15. The message that wouldn't stop. I thought I had seen it all when it came to broken relationships, but nothing could have prepared me for what my ex, Julia, put me through after our breakup. We had been together for almost 3 years. The first year was bliss, but after that, the cracks started to appear. She became controlling, always questioning where I was and who I was with. It was subtle at first, but it gradually worsened. She'd track my phone, call me multiple times a day, and when I didn't pick up, she'd send a barrage of angry texts. At first, I thought it was just jealousy, a sign of her love for me, but soon I realized it was something darker. I finally called it quits after an explosive argument one night. She wasn't violent, but the way she yelled at me, the way she threw my things around, made me realize I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up and moved out the next day, cutting all ties. I blocked her number, unfollowed her on social media, and tried to move on. For a few months, I didn't hear from her. I had started to feel like I could breathe again, like I could actually have a life without her hovering over me. But then, the messages started. At first, it was a simple text. "I miss you," it read. I deleted it without responding, but the next day another message appeared. This time, it was more insistent. "You can't just leave me like that." I blocked the number again, but that didn't stop her. She started sending me messages from different numbers. Each time it felt like she was getting closer. I couldn't get away from her, no matter how hard I tried. A few weeks later, I went to a party with a friend to clear my mind. I hadn't heard from Julia in days, and I was beginning to think that maybe she had finally moved on. But when I checked my phone on the way home, there was a text from an unknown number. "I saw you tonight." I froze. How did she know? I hadn't posted anything about the party. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I panicked and immediately turned my phone off. It wasn't until I got home that I decided to check the number. It wasn't Julia's usual phone number. It was a private number that kept changing each time I blocked it. For the next week, it felt like I was constantly on edge. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every time I saw a figure standing in the shadows or a car driving slowly by my house, my heart raced. It wasn't just the texts anymore. She was out there, watching me, following me. One night after work, I went to grab a drink at a local bar to unwind. As I sat down at the bar, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. When I looked around the room, my eyes locked onto a familiar face, Julia. She wasn't sitting at the bar, but she was standing in the corner, staring at me with that cold, calculating gaze she always had when she was angry. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was just watching. I stood up, my heart pounding. I quickly made my way to the bathroom, trying to avoid her. When I came back, she was gone. But when I checked my phone, I had a new message from a private number. It read, "You can't hide from me." I immediately left the bar, feeling like I was being suffocated. I got into my car and drove around aimlessly, trying to clear my mind. But every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw her. Julia was behind me, driving in the same direction. I tried to lose her, taking quick turns and driving down back streets, but no matter what I did, she kept following. Finally, I pulled into a gas station, hoping to lose her in the parking lot. I watched as she passed by, her car slowly rolling past mine, her eyes locked on me. It wasn't just the texts anymore. She was stalking me, watching my every move. I called the police the next day and filed a restraining order. I thought that would be enough to make her back off, but I was wrong. The messages continued, more frequent and disturbing than before. One day I got a text that simply said, "I'm inside your house." I rushed home, terrified. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. But the feeling of her presence lingered in the air. The police investigated, but they couldn't find any evidence that she had been in my home. I even had security cameras installed, but nothing was caught on film. But I knew she was still out there somewhere, watching. I changed my number again, moved to a different apartment, and kept a low profile. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, and I stopped going to places I frequented before. The messages stopped for a while, and I began to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could escape the nightmare. But then one day I received a package at my door. It was a small box with no return address. I opened it hesitantly, and inside was a picture of me from the party, the one she had stalked me at. She had written on the back, "You'll never get away from me." I don't know what she wants. I don't know why she won't leave me alone. But I do know one thing. I will never feel safe again. Even now I keep my windows locked, my doors double-checked, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. The messages have stopped, but I know she's still out there. I can feel it. And I don't know when or if this nightmare will ever truly end. Story 16. The Return of Laura, an ex's dangerous obsession. It had been months since I'd seen Laura. The breakup wasn't a bad one. In fact, it was one of those mutual agreements where both people realized they just weren't right for each other anymore. I thought we'd both go our separate ways, and that would be that. Little did I know, Laura had a very different idea of how things would go. Our key relationship had been a whirlwind. At first, I couldn't believe how lucky I was. Laura was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, charismatic, and full of life. She was one of those people who commanded attention whenever she walked into a room, and I had always admired her confidence. But with time, I began to realize that this confidence wasn't always so positive. At the beginning of our relationship, Laura was affectionate, kind, and caring. But as time went on, I began to notice little signs that things weren't quite as perfect as they seemed. She became overly jealous, checking my phone, monitoring who I was talking to, and questioning me about my whereabouts, even when I told her where I was. I thought it was just her being a little insecure, but when I brought it up, she'd laugh it off and tell me I was being too sensitive. But then the controlling behavior escalated. She started dictating where I went, who I could hang out with, and even what I wore. She didn't want me to see certain friends, especially my female friends. "You don't need them," she'd say. "You have me." And I did love her, or at least I thought I did. But after a while, I felt more and more like I was losing myself. Eventually, I decided I had to break up with her. It wasn't easy, but after one particularly heated argument, I knew I couldn't continue. She was a different person than the one I had fallen for, and the emotional toll it was taking on me was becoming unbearable. So, I ended things. I told her I needed space, that I needed to focus on myself, and that we were better off apart. Her reaction was unsettling but not surprising. She cried, begged me to stay, and promised she would change. But I had made up my mind. I couldn't live like that anymore. For the first few weeks after the breakup, I thought I was finally free. I went out with friends, started focusing more on my hobbies, and began rebuilding my life. But then, things started happening that made me question whether I was really free at all. It started with the messages. At first, they were innocuous enough, just casual texts asking how I was doing. But as the weeks went on, they became more desperate, more persistent. "I miss you," one text read. "We belong together," said another. When I didn't reply, the messages grew darker. "You'll regret leaving me," she wrote one night. "I'll make you realize how much you need me." I blocked her number, but that only seemed to make things worse. The messages continued, only they started coming from different numbers. First, an unknown number would text me, then another, then another. It was clear that Laura was using friends or anyone to get through to me, but it didn't stop there. One evening, I came home from work to find a note pinned to my door. It was in her handwriting. "I see you've moved on. You're not allowed to be happy without me." My blood ran cold. I immediately checked my locks and windows, but I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. A week later, I got a call at 2 a.m. I answered it without thinking, half asleep, only to hear Laura's voice on the other end. She was whispering, her words slurred, as if she had been crying or drinking. "You think you can escape me? You'll never be free from me. I know where you are. I know everything about you." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I called the police, but when they arrived, there was no trace of anyone around my apartment. They advised me to install security cameras, which I did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Laura was always one step ahead. The real shock came when I began to notice her showing up in places where I was, places where she shouldn't have been. I went to the grocery store one afternoon, and as I turned down the aisle, there she was, standing at the end of the aisle, looking directly at me. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just stared. I thought maybe I was imagining things, but then it happened again and again. She'd show up at my favorite coffee shop, at the library, and even at a friend's party. Each time I'd try to avoid her, but she always seemed to find me. The stalking was relentless, and no matter how many times I tried to change my routine, she found a way to be there. Then came the phone calls, the ones that shook me to my core. One night I received a voicemail. It was Laura's voice, but distorted, almost like she was talking through a speaker. "You can't hide from me," the message said. "I'll always know where you are. I'll always be watching." Terrified, I went to the police once more. They did an investigation, but when they checked the footage from my security cameras, there was nothing there. Laura had gotten clever, making sure to avoid being caught on tape. It wasn't long before I started receiving packages. At first, they were just small items, a bouquet, a book I used to like. But soon the packages grew darker. One night, I opened a box to find a pair of my old shoes, the ones I had worn when we first started dating. There was no note, no explanation, just the shoes. I started looking over my shoulder every time I left my apartment. I couldn't go out without feeling like someone was watching me. My friends started noticing my anxiety, and I began to withdraw, retreating into myself. One night, when I was out at a bar with a few friends, I noticed her again. She was standing at the back of the room, watching me with those cold eyes. My heart dropped into my stomach. This time I couldn't ignore it. I confronted her, demanding to know why she was doing this to me. Her response was chilling. She smiled, a twisted smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just making sure you don't forget about me. You belong to me. You'll always belong to me." I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know how to escape her. And as much as I wanted to leave the town and start fresh, I couldn't shake the feeling that she would follow me. The more I tried to distance myself, the more she latched on. Then, one evening, I returned home to find a note slipped under my door. It read, "You'll never escape me. I've always been part of you, and I always will be." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. And I knew that Laura would never let me go. She had become an obsession, a haunting force in my life. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. The torment never stopped. I had tried everything I could think of to break free from her. But in the end, I realized that sometimes there's no escaping an ex who refuses to let you go.